All right, we're rolling. So, everybody, welcome Dario Castillo. Is that correct?
That is correct, my man.
All right, and if you're new here, of course, well, hi, and but we'll get right into it. Uh, what is? I guess we'll start with how you got into fighting, how you got into mixed martial arts.
Well, growing up, I'd always been around it. Like my dad was really big into boxing and taekwondo and just really intrigued with fighting as a whole. And so they would have fight parties over at the house, have a bunch of people come over and they'd throw it on. And so kids would be running around playing and stuff like that. But I was always super intrigued with it. And so I'd sit there and I'd be watching and asking questions and all that stuff. I mean, I grew up watching karate movies and stuff like that as a kid. You sit there playing and imagining in your living room, and then it was whenever I was 11, this family from Guam had moved to Houston where I grew up, and he was a Muay Thai champion out there in that region, and so was his wife, and he trained jiu-jitsu and all this stuff. And so it's he had 9 kids, and so they used to all get together and they'd have basically a gym built in his garage, and they would all train. And so I used to run over to their house and we'd train on the weekends and stuff like that. And I went from being this real, chubby, nerdy kid that, was all out of shape and whatnot, strong. I was always naturally pretty uh, physical, but once I was able to start training, it was just I just ran with it. And so I trained with them uh, for a few summers because during school they wouldn't do it as much. And then it wasn't until I moved out to Arizona that I started getting into wrestling and stuff like that because football teams weren't that great. And once I finished high school, I started fighting. And I bounced around a couple of different places. And I've been at Lucero Jiu Jitsu for the last 2.5 years and been able to meet a lot of people. And it's slowly going from being just this fantasy of oh my gosh, that would be so great. I always saw martial artists as basically uh, real life superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
So to have that skill and ability to be able to just be a peacemaker and not have to feel threatened by anybody, but if this circumstance called for it, that you could just step up and handle stuff, at a drop of a dime, it was whoa. And so slowly and slowly, I've been, coming in contact with the right people, getting better and better, and it's just gradually becoming more of a reality. And here I am.
Yeah, I think that there's different variations on the same story for a lot of martial artists. It's just you want to protect yourself, and then you start really falling in love with it, and then okay, I'm gonna start taking fights and see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I do want to touch on your jujitsu in a second because I'm curious because I watched some of your fights for World Fighting Championship. I think
Yeah.
um, the Anthony Browder fight and the Deion Wilson fight. Just did some research, and you're at that point in your mixed martial arts career. I guess was you definitely seem like your stand up was cleaner than your ground game. So I want to see, or I would like to ask you, like, you're a blue belt in jujitsu, right? So how would you say that you're more proficient in those um, martial? And then what has jujitsu done for you in that scope?
Jiu-jitsu's done a lot. Before, I used to heavily rely on trying to do a lot of excess movement in order to uh, make little things happen. That I'd be wasting so much energy trying to do all this stuff, and it was so all over the place and without an actual set in path that it was I was I was doing way more than what I needed to in order to find success. Whereas with jiu-jitsu, it's all about the little details.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You
exactly.
practice the move 100 times and then go to class and see professor show, and he's look, whenever you go to do this, you need to put your hands like this. You need to elevate. You need to have it plant to your chest. Oh, you're leaving too much space. And those little details make it to where you can pull back. You don't have to rely so much on your athleticism or your physicality over the person that you're dealing with. You can use proper technique and be able to efficiently maneuver these, different motions in order to get far more success. And so it's really helped me dial in, and in a lot of ways it's helped it's helped me reset my mind as far as a necessity to uh, to try and force something to happen. Instead, now it's more of a chess game. It's more of a, okay, I'm gonna do this. What are you gonna do? You know, and
Mm-hmm.
then our step 3, 4, and 5, and making it to where in certain situations, for me, I'm a much shorter person in my weight class. I fight anywhere from 175 to 185. This next fight's at 175, but at 185, majority of people are taller. Like my last fight, the dude was like 6'3", 6'4", and so to deal with that kind of range, it makes it really difficult to try and get inside, especially whenever uh, you know all that leg coming, and I'm only 5'10", so it's like it's helped me kind of reshape how I approach uh, fighting and what kind of options I can take to where it's like, all right, let's offset people. Everybody expects me to come out, with a high kick or whatever right off
Yeah.
the bat, and different ways that I can change up my game, and just it's brought a lot more solidarity to my mindset, and just how I approach fighting as a whole.
Now, and would you say that affects your outlook, obviously in the cage, and then would you say that speaks to life as well for you, how you approach life?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like with any kind of art, what art is essentially just creative expression through other means. Aside from just plainly writing something down. But I take that back. Even writing is an art in itself. So it's like jujitsu has its own beauty to it. Like, for instance, not all grappling arts are the same. Obviously, you look at wrestling, and it's very much so about pressure and just dominant position.
Mm-hmm.
Jiu-jitsu, whenever I first started training, the guy that I trained under, Jornada, back in Houston, he was more so of a jiu-jitsu mindset. And with jiu-jitsu, you could be on your back. It was, Mitsuya Maeda, he was a little guy. He was like 130, 5'3", small Japanese dude, coming over to, you know, the States, North America, to try and, spread jiu-jitsu and everything like that. And so to have uh, the origins from being such a small instructor, being able to, use leverage and momentum, and, the understanding of anatomy and the weaknesses in the human body, uh, you can be far more effective regardless of the situation, regardless of the variables against you. And so it's like to be able to fight off your back, in which in wrestling, you're on your back, you lose. That's
Yeah.
it. Jiu-jitsu, you're just getting started. It brings in so much more. Being able to implement, your feet, and posting off the head, and what I really appreciate about gi jiu-jitsu that I never appreciated before, uh, until I started training it, was how smothering it can be in a gi. Like it's a like in wrestling you deal with pressure, but in gi jiu-jitsu, if the other person knows what he's doing, it's a giant handle, and to have somebody have that much control and possible restraint on what it is you're able to do, it makes it to where you really have to understand your technique, like uh, uh, and make it sharp as an edge, because like in nogi you can kind of scramble your ways through things because they can't hang on to you. There's not as much friction, there's not as much traction. And so in a gi you got that giant handle, and it's like you have to understand how it works in your favor to counteract what it is they're trying to do and shut down, to where it's like it makes it a lot more tactical. But even with that said, I go up to 10th Planet in Las Vegas every once in a while, and they're nothing but nogi guys, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
all out war. And to be able to have that balance between flow states, be it no matter the environment, is you got to be a master of it all, and that's a part of why I love mixed martial arts so much, and that's why, like, ever since I started focusing more so on jujitsu, with training over at Lucero, it's like it's taken me leaps and bounds past anything I could ever imagine. In wrestling in high school, I never won state or anything like that. I went to state. I was up there with the best of them at the time, but I I never thought I would ever amount to being something like IBJJF, white belt champ, even something that small. But like, there's so many different guys from all over the world that were there, and it's just like it's insane to see that you meet the right people, you put in the work, how far it can take you, and it's amazing, bro.
Yeah,
I love
I'm getting there. I'm trying.
it, and that's all it is. Like, it's the effort you put into it. What I love about mixed martial arts and jiu-jitsu as opposed to like playing football back in Texas growing up was it's all on you. The work you put into it is what you get out of it. You don't have to worry about somebody else doing their job or anything like that. Like, yeah, it's important to have your training partners there, and who you learn from can really dictate the speed in which you're able to move at times, and overall understanding, because everybody has a different style. Like, sure, it's jiu-jitsu, but as soon as you teach somebody jiu-jitsu, it's no longer what it was before. Like, my professor Lucero, whenever I train in Lucero Jiu-Jitsu and he shows me something, once I decide to do that move, it's no longer Lucero's move. It's Castillo's move. It's my
Yeah.
move, because there are different little paths that I'll take in order to implement it for my body type. We're different sizes, different strengths, different speeds, all these different things, flexibility, and so I will proceed to take different routes and have different tendencies based on whatever I'm able to see. And, you know, having guys that are super diverse makes such a huge difference as to uh, how you're able to progress. Because if everybody's rolling the same, then it's like, yeah, you'd be really efficient at that. Second, somebody throws a curveball, what are you gonna do? And so yeah, you just got to keep rolling, plain and simple,
Oh yeah, that's
every day.
definitely. And I think your point about passing down knowledge, because I can, I guess, relate to that in the way that you had shouted out the clip on my Instagram from the one of the podcasts I did for the Connor Cowboy fight, and I was kind of explaining Connor and Khabib and the position of your legs, and that was that week. Literally, we were working on the knee shield and how to pass that. So that's how I kind of worked that into the podcast. So that's interesting how that works.
It is, and I mean, that just further just all the beauty of martial arts, and just like everybody always told me growing up, you shouldn't fight, you shouldn't do that stuff. Like, just do it as a hobby. Like, whatever you do, you should make sure that you're using your brain. Because you're a smart kid. I'm like, man, I am using my brain. The creativity and the amount of mental stimulation that jujitsu, especially martial arts as a whole, uh, does for somebody. Like, it's therapy. I can't tell you how many people I know that are, yeah, former military, or coming from all different stages of life. We got a dude who's like 64. He's a lawyer, and he trains and everything is full of that shit. I think it's unequivocally stands above the rest of any art that you could have, because of just it touches all the bases, be it spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally. I feel it just makes like people better as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. Even as unseasoned as I am in it, I've been doing it for 4 months, but I can definitely see all those. I agree with you in pretty much every single way. It's teaching me a lot of patience. But move back to your career and your fights. So how are you structured in the way that you're taking fights? Is there a big gap? Like what are you doing for training in that sense? And then what are you eating is also a question I wanted to ask you because I think that's really
Um,
important.
yeah, definitely. What it is that our bodies are machines, and if I take if I had like a Lamborghini and I run it on just regular unleaded fuel, and I took it to the racetrack, it's not going to run very good. There's going to be other cars just whipping right past me because I'm not running off the right fuel. If I want to compete like a Lamborghini or a Bugatti or whatever, I need to run on the proper fuel and maintenance. And
Right.
so that all comes down to what you put in your body. So whenever it comes to like outside of fight camp, I'll be honest. I love food. Before I started fighting and training again, I was like 270, bro. Now I'm walking around like 200 and I cut down 185, 175. And so usually once I get into fight camp, well, outside of fight camp, I eat kind of whatever I want, but it's usually based on what it is I'm doing that day. If I'm training super hard, yeah, I'll probably splurge a little bit, bring on the pizza dog. What's up? But if I'm not doing much, I'll keep it real simple. Like there's this trail mix stuff that I've been eating that it sounds silly, but it's all like raw nuts and stuff like that, and it's got like dried cherries and dried raisins, and it's like a bunch of protein, simple carbs, no oils, no salts or anything like that, and I'm able to just kind of snack throughout my day so that I'm not like necessarily getting hungry, but with those kind of foods, it keeps my metabolism just rolling, and so eat that. Um, in the mornings, I don't usually eat anything aside from that. If I do have a lunch, it's like a bunch of spinach, kale, cucumbers, peppers, and I'll cook up like an egg or two and throw it on there. And then for dinner, my favorite go-to is chorizo and eggs. I'll put it on a bunch of like a bed of kale and spinach, or I'll
Ooh,
slap it in a tortilla, call it good.
sounds
And
good.
hmm?
Sounds good.
Oh, it's delicious. You ever come out to Arizona? I got you, bro. We'll roll. I'll make some food.
All right. Uh,
It'll
yeah.
have to be after coronavirus, but save the date. We'll make it happen.
All right. Uh, you mentioned cutting. So you're walking around at like 200 outside of camp, or how far before a fight are you walking around at 200? Like when do you cut?
um, I usually start cutting a month in. So before that, I try to be between like 200 and 195. And then once I'm within that month, I try not to shoot above 195. Like for me, I wait until 2 weeks out, then I get down to 185 and I can coast. That's really easy for me.
Mm-hmm.
But with this fight, it was supposed to happen on the 18th of April, but because of everything that's going on, they're postponing it. So it's going to be the same exact card, probably sometime in May. We'll see what happens. But whenever I get down to the last 2 weeks, that's either when I'm coasting or that's whenever I'm getting down to make 175. So like I was coming down to where I was between 190 to 185 at the end of practices, and then on the second week, the whole goal is to get down to 180. So I'll do stuff like hitting a sauna and stuff like that after I get done with my runs or whatever, and making sure that I'm eating before I go to train and stuff because usually I don't get home until it's like 11, almost 12 o'clock at night. And it's difficult. You got to eat then. Your body's all tanked out. Like your metabolism isn't running anymore. And then you're just storing it on and then you're just starting back to square one. So that, and I try to get down to where I'm at weight the week of the fight because I've done the whole last minute cut, in wrestling, we did those all the time.
Yeah.
I was kind of the guy that oversaw to make sure that people made weight. And it sucks. Some people, that's what they have to do. A lot of guys like to cut like from really heavy weights, like majority of 185 cut from like 215, 210. Some even higher than that. You look at guys like Yoel Romero and Paulo Costa, they cut from 220 to
Mm-hmm.
make 185. That's
Yeah.
insane. 40 pounds. But there's guys who do that. And so for me, I just don't feel like I function as well. Making those drastic cuts last minute, cutting water weight, your body's majority water, but you got water in your head as well, and that's what actually is responsible for your equilibrium. That's why, like, whenever TJ Dillashaw went to fight Henry Cejudo, I was kind of nervous I thought his best bet would have been to make it a 5-round war. I felt like Dillashaw would have had a much better shot at winning that way, as opposed to just go in there and try and knock him out. Because whenever that fluid level in your ears is down, like you get hit with anything and it's gonna knock you sideways. Like you're not gonna be able to have the proper
Right. Yeah.
amount of yeah durability for that. And so usually I'm at weight, the week of. Just try to keep it clean. Keep a majority of carbs out. So like I'll cut out like bread, tortillas, rice, and like my only carbs will come from fruits, like right before training, and then just veggies. Aside from that, it's just proteins and fats.
Yeah. That's how you got to run it. But what was I gonna say? Oh yeah. So at that, when you're cutting and then you get down to 85.
Somebody just tried to call.
Oh, no worries.
We're good. You were saying?
Oh, so when you get down to 85, to use Connor and Cowboy as an example again, both of them when they go up to 170 are a little more. You can see the weight has a little bit of effect on their performance. But do you have the opposite effect when you're actually fighting? That when you get rid of that 15 to 20 pounds, that you're more, you can feel lighter and you can actually perform at a higher level.
Yeah, you definitely feel an edge, and like there's a certain, if you go into a fight and you haven't had those days in which it's like you feel like you're being ran to your wits end, to where it's like you feel like everything's ready to shut down, like those kind of days in the gym get you so mentally prepared and just hardened for those moments in which you go in there, because you're just like, there's a different level of confidence whenever you go in there and you're like, I did everything I could do.
Right. Yeah.
I can get this. You know the work you put in for that. Whereas whenever you're fighting at a little bit higher weight, it's you just feel different. Yeah, it's nice to not feel drained, but there's a certain level of comfort that can kind of offset you from having that same kind of fire going in there, you know. But I don't know. Some people have a different effect. Like I felt like I mean, it's hard to really tell with the Connor Cowboy fight. I feel like Cowboy looked a lot more sluggish, whereas with Connor, had we seen a little bit longer into the fight, we would be able to better gauge how he would actually do at 170. Because I mean, you look at both times he fought Nate.
Yeah.
He gassed hard. I felt like Nate kind of inched him as far as total overall strikes, but Connor had the bigger moments in their second fight. And so that could have been thrown as a draw, in my opinion. And then, I don't know. But that fight against Cowboy, bro, what threw me off about that was the fact those shoulder bashes, we had been working that like straight up for an entire month before I seen that fight. And I was like, oh my God, that really does work.
Yeah. So, like some of the stuff with MMA, you see how unorthodox, like Anderson Silva's front head kick. Nobody was using that before him, and then he used it, and then everybody using it in that early part of the 2010s. And it's the same. It'll be the same thing with the shoulder strikes. You're going to see that more used. Oh, Conor McGregor worked for him, should work for me.
Oh yeah, right. And the thing is that it all comes down. You got to try it. For some people, they go to do that front kick that Anderson Silva did, and they're like, man, that's so weird. Like kicking up that high, I just don't have the flexibility or whatever.
Yeah.
Same thing with the shoulder bash. Some people, they either have really narrow shoulders or they're really short, or like just their posture just doesn't seem to work for it. If they're too tall, it's like trying to bash somebody in the shoulder like that. Okay, kind of weird. You got to take a different angle, change level, whatever. And it's just one of those things. You got to play with it. You got to see how it fits your style. And for me, same thing with Khabib's eagle mount. Well, where he locks his legs up around the other person's legs, smashes them together, and then he triangles up over it. We
Mm-hmm.
call it the eagle. But like I've been working that into my game ever since I started training jiu-jitsu, and I seen Khabib going on his tear that he's doing. It's like, man, he's everybody he fights. Whenever he gets him to the ground, the first thing he does is smash the legs, look to fold up, and then climb the tree. And so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna start working that. And so it's like it's a great way. It works great for both gi and no gi. And it's like, man, I give a lot of people a hard time with that. And you see a lot more of these Dagestani guys and all these other Russians and people that are training with them are now starting to do that. They're not really pointing it out or anything, but it's like you can see that the trend is carrying on. And that's what's so exciting. It's always growing. You know, there's always more to learn.
Yeah, you're right. The other, in terms of training, the other thing I wanted to ask you is how often are you doing no gi versus gi?
Um, we train gi 3 days a week for about 2 hours, and then Tuesdays and today on Saturdays we do like open mats for no gi. For me, like I did a lot of wrestling in high school, so I understand a lot of different techniques for like takedowns and stuff like that, and so um, and like just kind of overall flowing. And so whenever we do open mats, it's also kind of like a Q&A at the same time. Like everybody that comes through is obviously different skills and ages and stages of life, and so we'll sit there and like in the midst of our role, if somebody's like, "Hey, like, dude, I don't know how to get out of this. I don't know how you're always doing. I know you're gonna shoot. I don't like. What do I do about it?" And then we'll sit there and we'll break it down, and so it's kind of like a one-on-one team learning session. So. Uh, 2 days a week we're getting that in, and then on Thursdays is our main MMA striking day. So because we train jujitsu and grappling so much, we try to take that one day to like really hone in on that. And then yeah, every once in a while on Sundays we go out to 10th Planet. So definitely 3 days a week of gi jujitsu, 3 days a week of no gi.
Okay, so it's pretty even. I wasn't sure if it was more no gi in terms of that's more MMA centric, but that's interesting that it's pretty even.
Yeah, and a lot of like anytime I go up to 10th Planet, all those guys are like, man, if you want to be the best at something, you should train just that. I'm like, I understand that, but I've learned so much from training gi jiu-jitsu that at this point, I feel like it would be stupid to stop. Like because of the fact that I'm still getting better and better. And it's like whenever I face a lot of these people, it's like not trying to toot my own horn or anything, but I'm a blue belt that's been competing against purple belts ever since I was a white belt. My very first no gi submission only match was up against a purple belt, and I was a two-stripe white belt, and we came out to a draw after a 7-minute sub only match. Like the level of jiu-jitsu that I'm training out here is much higher than most other places, and it's a lot of my growth I have to attribute to majority of gi because that's primarily what I do train out here. We implement our own no gi days, and my professor comes out for that and he works with us on that. But for the most part, it's just us teammates working with each other. So I have a lot of value in gi, which is weird for most fighters.
Yeah, that's also interesting to hear. But it's good to hear. I mean, all I hear is okay. If you want to be good at one, like you said, pick one. But that's refreshing that you're learning
Yeah.
from both.
Well, and that's just it. You can't be cornered off from any style. Like my professor, he started off as a wrestler. He was he wrestled through college and stuff like that. And once he started doing that, that's whenever he started getting introduced.
Hello, everybody. Um, Coming to you from my humble abode, and just want to let you know before we get into this conversation with Dario that half the interview got cut off, probably the best half, unfortunately. But in the first half, we did talk about um what jiu-jitsu means for both of us, and a couple other things in terms of fight prep for him, diet, training, all that kind of stuff I was interested in. And as for socials, social media, you can follow us at clubhouse.cast on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter is pod_clubhouse. And then for him, it's Dario Dude on Instagram and Facebook. So if you want to reach out to him, but enjoy.